On today's episode of the ThriveMore podcast, I interview Uzo Ometu. Uzo is one super cool dude, but he's the co-founder of BlackOakTV, and it's a media company specifically targeting the Black audience. But what you're going to really find from Uzo is the power of story. And he talks about working at Google and YouTube and the power of story in those companies, inside of those companies, and then how he's used the lessons he's learned there to found this new digital media company, this streaming company, and his goals and his objectives and the dream for his company is big. And that's what I really appreciated about this interview is he is dreaming big and he is working to make this to become a reality. It's an example of an entrepreneur looking and working hard and striving to change the world. You're going to dig this one. Uzo is an aspiring media and technology mogul hoping to bring more underrepresented voices into the forefront by leveraging his experience in journalism, entertainment, and technology. Currently, he's doing that through his new venture, BlackOakTV, which is a subscription video platform service serving Black audiences. Prior to starting his latest venture, Uzo worked at YouTube, where he helped YouTube's efforts to partner with the greater media industry by acquiring content from media companies large and small. And prior to that role, while at Google, he served as a consultant for digital media agencies and as a liaison between some of Google's product and sales teams in the media and technology solutions organization. So he's been there, done that, and now he's doing it for himself and for the audience that he serves. So Uzo, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. That was a mouthful, man. You've done a lot so far. So can you kind of take us from the genesis, maybe just a little bit of your background, maybe growing up and you know, what the origin story there is, and then we'll get into BlackOakTV and kind of your experience at YouTube and Google and all that.
Yeah. I kind of walk you up to that and dive deeper later. So I am the product of an immigrant father and a mom from the South, and I think they both had me very young, and as a result, probably exposed me to more things than I probably otherwise should have been. So I was always interested in various forms of content, whether it be music and TV, but obviously books and movies and art. And somewhere along the line of just growing up, I just always got involved with things that were related to creating art out of something. So I started, writing in journals. I was writing for my school newspaper. I was creating the school yearbook. I was, hosting talent shows. I wrote a couple of books while I was in high school. They never went anywhere, but I wrote them nonetheless. And so I've always just been excited about content, the creation of it, the process that goes into that. And then eventually somewhere in college, while I was at Columbia University, I got really interested in the business side of it, and how these things get funded, what makes these things work. How come there are only like 3 or 4 media companies that I'm applying to for after school to try and get a job. And so in starting to understand that, I really got enamored with that side of the content industry as well. And, basically have been enraptured ever since. So my first job was as a journalist coming out of college. And I really enjoyed that experience, getting to meet people, being at the heart of a content creation business, working with writers and editors and photographers. And it was, extremely rewarding. And then somehow I got sucked over to the sports side of things because it's always been an interest of mine as well. So I ended up at ESPN, producing, writing, doing various things for the radio and TV networks. And ultimately, this thing that kept coming up within me was like, okay, how do I get some of my ideas out there? How do some of the perspectives of myself and my upbringing get more prevalent on these platforms? And, while there were always good, well-meaning people at these places, it was never happening, right? It was just never the right time. It was never the right amount of money, the right amount of return, and trying to pitch those types of ideas. And eventually I ended up at YouTube and Google. I was like, okay, here we are, Silicon Valley. Everybody means well. They have the money, the means. There's nothing stopping, these companies from what I thought was, just fairer representation of Black people on the platforms, and then the content that was coming out of them. And yes, the people were well-meaning. Money was even invested, but at the end of the day, it never made economic sense for them or these other companies to go all into that space, right? Like at the end of the day, it makes more, if you can invest, X amount of dollars into a show and the intended audience is 5 million people versus another show where the intended audience is 60 million people, the second show always makes more sense. And you're always swinging for the fence. You're always trying to have this thing that resonates with the most people as possible with as little money as possible. And even though there are studies that show, that approach doesn't always work and quite frankly, doesn't usually work on average, that was still the approach everyone was taking. And so for me, the takeaway from my time at these traditional media companies and then even these high-tech media companies, it was simply that, you have to be dedicated to this audience if you're going to make economic sense for the business, because there's no other higher order, right? If your audience is these people, in my case, Black people, then the only thing that ever makes economic sense is to do what's best for that specific audience. If you have multiple constituencies, you have multiple audiences, or if you're just not focused at all and you're trying to serve everyone, then in effect, you can't serve some of the smaller audiences contained within that. And so that was the genesis for BlackOakTV, that we knew in order for this to work, mainstream wasn't ever going to give it the proper justice because it wasn't in their economic interest to do it. And so we had to create an alternative model where the economics aligned with the mission and values that I had.
Oh, I love it. Well, that's okay. That was a wonderful encapsulation of your journey. And it's, as we sit here and do this podcast, it feels like things are changing almost in real time. I mean, you have Jordan Peele, who's just knocking the cover off the ball. And even though he's building his content for a Black audience that's resonating with a much larger audience. I love his films, absolutely love his films. And I'm an old white guy, right? So, like he's really hitting the spectrum there, but it seems like that pendulum is starting to swing as it should. But if we can go back and maybe talk about your time then at Google and YouTube, what did you specifically learn there that you were able to apply as you started your own thing? Because, there's a lot of listeners that they're in corporate America right now and they want to start their own thing. They're ready to start a business or buy a franchise, do something, start a content company, but they're scared to death. But I think some of them don't realize the skills they have and they're learning in corporate America are directly applicable to what they can do on their own. If you could speak to that, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah. I think I'll try to do it at least in two ways. One, just from a general perspective, and maybe something a little bit more tactical and specific. But I think generally speaking, the biggest thing that I learned in my time at Google was just the power of storytelling. And this was coming from someone who was interested in content and, obviously understood the power of movies and TV and music. But I think within the context of business, people wiser than me already knew this, but for me, this was a big learning thing. And that, it's just how much stories move business, how much they move people, managers, employees, customers, deals, and again, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad, but being able to tell an effective story for the environment that you're in, for the audience that you're targeting, just like with movies and with TV shows, that is just so important in business. Quite frankly, it may be the only thing that matters in business. If you can tell a story that hits all of your constituencies, gives them the information or the feelings or the needs that they require, that's going to be what helps you get things done, achieve things, get the resources that you need. And at Google, it's just so prescient how much storytelling is required to succeed there and get things done. And obviously they have, what makes for a good story within the context of Google and business is different than what it is at other places. Google's always, very much about, hey, data is what matters. Tell us the facts, tell us, why this is going to work and make sure that you can give us examples and concrete numbers as to why something makes sense. And so that was always important in telling the story there. But then as, I was there and had to pitch, Google or YouTube services to other companies, sometimes that mattered and sometimes that didn't matter as much. Sometimes, the specific numbers weren't as important. And it varied on who the key stakeholder was too. So just being able to really focus in on the story and the audience that you're telling that story to, that was just a big key that I got out of Google. The other thing was just processes, having a process set up for something. Google was very key on that. There were millions of spreadsheets and documents and all types of things to get processes in line. And so that was probably the first time I was doing that at scale for lots of people, internally, externally, and just learning that, there is no magic process that solves anything. Oftentimes, what works for a period of time might not work a year later. And so you just always have to be willing to adjust and update. But having that process in place, having things organized, having something visual that people can see, process, can see what's going on within the process just makes, I think, so much easier for you and for the people that you're working with. So those are the big things for me: storytelling and having a process in place.
The process and using processes, especially from a big company that's so well established, like that makes total sense. I was not expecting you to say storytelling. That's one of the things you learn most from Google. That's very fascinating. So how have you then applied that learning of storytelling around BlackOakTV? Is there a direct parallel of how you've applied that learning?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, and I don't know if this was the right thing or right thing or wrong thing to do, sure. But I think starting out, the first story I had to tell was to investors, to venture capitalists, to angel investors, in order to get this thing going. So I had to be able to convey to them, why this was a problem, who it was a problem for, why they'd be willing to pay for it, and why we're going to be able to make money from this. And I had to encapsulate that pretty quickly. The numbers around, how long VCs spend reading your pitch deck and how on each slide are super low. It's like they spend 3 seconds on each slide. They spend 30 seconds reading your whole pitch deck. You spend hours, days, probably weeks putting this thing together. And, you can see the data. They have these services where you can see how long they spend on each slide. And you're like, man, this guy told me he loved my idea and everything. He spent 7 seconds on this slide that had all this amazing information. So, and so you have to understand that. You have to understand the context within how they work, the fact that they're probably looking at 50, 60, 70 decks a day. And so you have to contextualize your story within the framework with which they're going to read it. And so just going through that process and getting advice and feedback and honing that over and over again. And it was probably the first time in my life where I was having to tell the same story so repetitively. I mean, there were certainly times at YouTube where, I was making certain pitches around an initiative or whatever, and that was somewhat repetitive. But for this, it was, every day, maybe 10 to 15 times a day, just giving that same delivery on that pitch. Yeah. And you just get so much better at it over time. And there are probably people who do it even better than me, who take copious notes at the end of everything. But for me, it was, somewhat natural, right? You do it one time, you saw that, these people laughed. And so you can tell that same joke over and over again. And it hits every time. And then, or the question that they're asked. So you tackle it beforehand, or you have a slide in the appendix ready for it to answer all the time. I just saw how important that was. And not just conveying the message, but getting that person to believe in you, connect with you, have, develop some rapport with you, because obviously that was going to be the first step in anybody actually wanting to invest in you, was actually, seeing you as someone that they want to work with. So just, all those learnings from Google about, what types of numbers matter, being able to understand different viewpoints, what key stakeholders are looking for, just boiling all of that down into those first fundraising efforts, those first few months after I left, were just so important and so vital. And I don't think if I didn't have that experience of doing that and talking to people, above me, in the hierarchy, or third parties and partners, it was just so valuable in getting that out the box. And I see that now in talking to really young founders who haven't had as much work experience and are coming at entrepreneurship for the first time. And you see how some of this is just, to me, it seems like, basic stuff and table stakes and things you should know, and saying, oh no, they really haven't gone through this before. And so that advice actually does help them. That was just something that I probably took for granted, but it helped me a lot in trying to raise money for BlackOakTV.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you aligned with me where I have actually found inspiration from stand-up comedians, and just like the way they build their set, the way they build, their bits and put them together, and the delivery to me is not that much different than a business pitch. It's kind of the build, it's the setup, the ask, and then the payoff. For them, it's a big laugh. For us, hopefully it's an investment. But it's just as I listen to you talk about, no, that joke hit, so I use that again, and then they didn't pay attention to that slide, so I went past that. It's funny. It's almost like real-time feedback how comedians build their tour before they go out and do it. They'll build it little bits at a time, and I've just seen a parallel between those two. Yeah.
No, that's a great analogy. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, you can watch Netflix stand-up specials and write that off as a tax deduction. So don't take that from me. Ask your accountant. But I think there's some something there. So people are consuming more media than ever, right? That amount of eyeball time is more now than ever. So how are you differentiating BlackOakTV from other media outlets? And I would add to that, even other Black specific, media. So what is your strategy to, one, differentiate from the mass market, and then also win your niche as well?
Yeah, well, I think right there, like to your point, there are two kind of things out there that we are competing with. There's the mass market, and there are people that are within our niche. On the mass market side, it's pretty obvious, right? Like our goal is really about celebrating and amplifying Black voices and stories. The fact that there's not enough of that out there, that even when you find it on some of these other platforms, it's not representative of the wide swath of Black stories and personas and characters that exist. That's very important for us, just showing that distinction between, the lack of representation on mass media and sometimes the inaccurate or biased representation of Black people on those platforms. In terms of, other people that are in this space as well, I think one of the big things that we are trying to pitch to consumers and that we're working on continuously is the community aspect of what we're trying to build, right? Like one of the things about, Black users on the internet in particular is just how engaged they are. They over-index in terms of their social media usage, their social media content creation. And so you come up with, you see things like, the term Black Twitter being coined, or at YouTube, Black millennials for a long time while I was there were the highest users of YouTube on a relative basis. So, just understanding, how much they're not just looking for alternative content, but they're looking for that conversation about the alternative content. That's what we're trying to bring to BlackOakTV. We're trying to create a space where an audience can see themselves represented, talk about it, commune about it, and find a home or a third place, a digital third place where they can really, talk about these things that they're experiencing with one another. And so we're trying to build that up a great deal. And with that, we're also trying to allow people to contribute to the content that's on the platform. So you look at something like YouTube, where for a long time, Black creators were having some success and building out these audiences, and just like other YouTubers, but they were uniquely having these people follow them elsewhere, go to their concerts, their one person plays, whatever it may be. I just saw so much activity around that space. And so for us, we want to make sure that, they feel heard. And so they're always commenting while I was at YouTube, you saw the comments, they were trying to influence the users to do this or that. And so we want to have some of that built into BlackOakTV as well. And so right now, we are starting to allow people to, vote on the series that they want us to invest in, that they want to see more of. And in the long term, we're hoping that means they can connect with their creators. They can talk about the characters. They can start to kind of drive a little bit of what's happening on the platform, so we have a bit of a community-driven narrative throughout the stories that you see on BlackOakTV, without losing the art, without losing the vision of the director, but just allowing the community to feel like, hey, we're a part of this. It makes them feel seen. It makes them feel heard. It allows them to build that community, and it allows the shows to be perhaps more representative of the audience that they're serving.
Yeah. I went to get ready for this interview and prepare for this. I went on your website and looked at some of the different content, and it looked like there's some drama, some family, fare, so to speak. I think some comedy. My first question that came to my head is Uzo sourcing this, or are you guys financing your own projects, or do independent filmmakers or showrunners bring you content to find a home for their content, or are you actually creating shows, funding those shows, or is it a mixture of both? Can you talk to that?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of both. Basically, I would say, there's probably a multitude of ways we get content on the platform, but there are two primary things that we do. So one, there are BlackOakTV originals. So that is where we work with independent filmmakers, creators to create something very specific for BlackOakTV. And so 9 times out of 10, it's us getting connected, seeing what stories they want to tell, figuring out what we think will work best for the audience that we have on BlackOakTV and the audience that we ultimately want to have, and say, all right, let's go partner on this. Let's make this together. BlackOakTV provides the financing, the support services, the help, but ultimately it is the creator that is driving that project, making things happen, creating the story, and then ultimately we distribute it on BlackOakTV as an original series of our own. And then there's the second bucket, which is largely just us acquiring other content that's already been created. Probably over half of it is available in places other than BlackOakTV, but we're just trying to be a place where you can find as much of the independent Black content that's out there today, aggregated all into one place to make everyone's viewing process as easy as possible. So we have the combination of originals with other content that is usually in line with the type of thing that you see from our originals. It just wasn't created by us. It wasn't created exclusively for us. And so we're just trying to figure out ways to bring more of that on the platform without having to create everything on our own.
Sure. And I saw, I won't mention on the podcast, but your price point is below Netflix, very, very competitive. So it's obviously a subscription-based streaming service, but do you also generate revenue through ads? If you could just talk about the business model, I think that'd be fascinating for the listeners. Because again, Uzo, the guest today, created this from scratch. Like, guys, that's the message. Like, the sky's the limit. Like, literally was working at YouTube and Google and said, I can do this better. I can do this, more specific for a specific audience, and went out and started this. So that's great. But what I'd love for you to share now, Uzo, is, okay, how do you actually make money at this? Right? How do you actually make money at it?
Yes. And so, first and foremost, I do have a co-founder. And so I'm someone who has been along me with this ride. And, I recommend that if you can get it. It's not required, but it certainly, at least for me, makes things a little bit easier not to have to worry about everything by myself. But in terms of, the business, so yes, we are a streaming video platform. We charge a monthly fee. Right now, in order to access our content, you do have to pay the subscription fee. We don't serve any ads, so it is strictly subscription only. Over time, probably sooner rather than later, we will start to introduce a totally free plan that does have ads to the overwhelming majority of our content. So that way it can be more accessible to folks. But with the subscription, yes, we charge a monthly price. We rely on those subscription fees to drive and grow the business. And eventually with ads, what you'll see is us serving, X number of ads per hour of streaming that someone is using the content in order to hopefully replicate that same monthly price that we would have charged before. And then that allows us to reinvest those funds into content, marketing, and building the technology that powers the system.
Hey everyone, as you know, I don't have any advertisements nor sponsorships on this podcast. My only ask of you, the listener, is that you share this podcast with someone that you know, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a colleague who may benefit from this information, may benefit from today's guest, from the value that they're sharing with the audience, with you, the listener. When you share this podcast and our audience grows, it allows me to book more and more guests who have a great message, great nuggets of wisdom that you can benefit from, and again, your network can benefit from. So please, right now, push that share button, send it to somebody that you care about, and let's get back to the interview. Uzo, do you guys have, one, I appreciate you calling out your co-founder, and I would also add to that, one, you don't have to make every decision and carry the whole load, but being a founder can be lonely too. Like, that's a lonely job, and having a co-founder, a partner, takes a little of that away, so I would also recommend to someone listening, it has to be the right partner. It's a marriage, so 100% it has to be the right partner, but the right partner can certainly make the journey more enjoyable, as you said. Do you see BlackOakTV following the Netflix approach where, now they're doing a very limited release in theaters, which makes it, I guess, Oscar worthy for a nomination or whatever, but also, get some hype for the release, and then they very quickly bring it onto the platform. Is that something you've thought about, talked about?
Yeah, I mean, so we're a long way from Netflix, and once we get to that point, listen, those would be great problems to have. I think for the most part, but I would say in general, yes, I think we are thinking more than just, hey, let's put everything on BlackOakTV and allow people to view and stream, and that's the only way they can interact with us. I think we are thinking about other ways that we can work with folks. I think it'll be less about, in the near future, it'll be less about, wide movie releases or anything like that, and more about, okay, can we partner with this other service that may have an audience that's interested in what we're doing? Or can we have a one-off screening where we can rent a movie theater in places with large Black populations like New York City, like Houston, like Detroit, Atlanta. And so I think you might start to see more of that. One, as a way to just expose it to more people and, make it more event driven, but also to start building that community, right? So can we go back to these places time and time again where people want to see what we've put together? I think in the past, we've hosted some comedy shows where we've brought in Black comedians from across the country, really awesome people, put together a 90-minute, 2-hour show that people really enjoyed, and it allowed us to feature, some amazing up-and-coming Black comedians, some of which are in BlackOakTV series, some of which will eventually be in BlackOakTV series. We could show them trailers of content that's on the platform. So it was a real, multimodal experience for people to enjoy BlackOakTV and get to know us. So I think you'll see things more like that, where it is event-driven. It's about community building, as we grow. And then hopefully, as we start to get bigger and bigger, the hope is that we can do things like, bring movies directly to theaters. And I think, the really interesting thing as of late with Beyonce and, Taylor bringing their concert series to AMC directly, that really is going to change the market in terms of what's available to independent content creators who before maybe had, a handful of art houses that they could take their movies to. But now places like AMC are opening that opportunity up. Granted, it'll be for things where they believe folks can drive their own audience, but for a limited release, a scaled back release in, coastal cities, which is what everyone does with these pictures, generally speaking, there might be an opportunity for us to do deals like that and be able to drive out an audience that would justify putting some of our content in theaters.
Yeah, that's super cool. Uzo, what's been the most rewarding thing so far? I mean, you said, we're not Netflix, but I've read the startup story for Netflix, and it wasn't Netflix, for the longest time. Like that was about as ragtag of a startup as you could have until they got it figured out. But what has been one of the most pleasant surprises of this? Because you've undertaken a humongous task here to launch a streaming service. And of course, I'm going to ask you the other question, which, what's been the hardest thing and the most unpleasant surprise, but what's been the most pleasant surprise? Like, wow, this all, this particular thing all went to plan. This was out or better than we thought. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I would say for me, the big thing is just that anybody subscribes to this. Yeah. Like for me, the idea that somebody would, take $6.99 of their own money and put it into a company they've never heard of, largely for a TV series with actors and actresses that they've never heard of, with all the things going on in their lives, with all the scams out there, with all the other content that they can watch that have tens of millions of dollars marketing to them. The fact that somebody would take interest in what we're doing and want to see it, as much as that was obviously a part of the business plan, you have that fear when you release it. Like, will anybody actually click buy? Like, because I know all the times I see ads on Facebook and maybe I click on them and I'm like, no, I'm not paying. I never heard of this. There's no reviews. There's no stars. Like, and so the fact that people did that from the beginning, obviously it speaks to, hopefully the need in the market that we've seen, but just also, hopefully the fact that, we did something right. Like the trailer that person watched was cool. The title cover that they saw was sexy enough for them to want to look at it. The technology we had actually worked so that people could actually get through the process. And the story that we told resonated with them, right? So whether it was them reading our mission, seeing our pitches, looking at the things that we write online, that some combination of that, got people to actually sign up for the service. And, as much as, that's always the plan, it doesn't always happen for everybody. And so I think, we are, hopefully worked hard enough and had the right timing and the right luck to get people to want to subscribe to what we're doing.
Yeah.
In terms of the biggest upset, it's probably the other side of that, right? It is the people who just outright reject what you're doing. You're like, oh, this type of person is, just who we made this for. They gotta love it. And then, you just get some, you get a 1-star rating. Somebody says, oh, don't ever buy this. It's no good. Or people are like, oh, I've never heard of this. What's this? I can't buy that. The Facebook comments are ruthless sometimes.
Everybody's a keyboard warrior. Everybody's a keyboard warrior. Yeah.
And so, I try not to read those. I want to read them because I want the feedback to improve, and they do help us improve. But sometimes they are not constructive at all. No. And you're like, man, are we doing the right thing? Are we on the right path? Because, when you put it out there, for us, we work with a lot of creators who have hundreds of thousands, millions of followers. We've obviously experimented with Facebook ads and TikTok. So, we've reached tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at a time. And so sometimes we do get an influx of feedback, and the negative aspect of it, is not fun. Again, when it's constructive, I have no problem taking feedback. Anytime we get like a professional write-up, I save that page, take notes on it and say, okay, how can we, attack these things that were problematic? But, the emotional responses, the vitriol sometimes that can be bad, because, it makes you wonder, like, do we, are we telling the right story? How are we reaching these people? And so, you just have to, take a step back, try to see it for what it is. If you see a lot of it, obviously try to act on it where it makes sense. But sometimes you just have to realize that, you're not going to be for everybody, or that people, like I said, people are going to be willing to take risks, right? Not everybody is a first follower. We're still in that early adopter stage. And so for the most part, you're going to have a lot of people that just aren't ready for the message or the story that we have today. And, hopefully as we grow and evolve, we can get more and more of those people into the story that we're telling.
Well, you've said story about 15 times, which I love, because that's kind of the mantra for this interview. I love it. The word that comes to mind is courage. The fact that you're putting this content out. One, of course, the content creator, the director, the writer, the actors that are in it. course, they're putting themselves out there, but that's the thing about business. When you put a product out there, you're putting yourself out there. And I too, launched many businesses, and that first sale, I'm like, oh my God, somebody bought this. Wow. That was the plan. But when they actually hit, purchase, it is, at least for a little while, there's almost a happy surprise. But certainly you have to have courage, because there's, several, probably not as many, but that like it, but there'll be enough that don't like it, or just they're having a bad day and they're going to take it out on your product, whatever it is. And man, you have to have the courage to keep going, because they're, unfortunately, some of those people are doing everything they can to pull your dream back when you can't allow them to do that. So speaking of dreams, and if you were to fast forward, and nobody's got a crystal ball to see into the future, but if you were able to, and you fast forward 5, even 10 years, because in media is a big play. This is a long game you're playing. If you go forward 10 years, what would be your dream, your goal for BlackOakTV?
Yeah, I think, going as far and trying to, encapsulate that into something that doesn't take too long to say is hard. But I would say, if I were to compare it to there are two things that I kind of look at as in the long term. One is kind of a Black version of HBO, in that we're trying to tell, very compelling, well done, admittedly high cost stories that, can really lock people in, engage people on a week to week basis, move the culture, take over the zeitgeist, and really, if you think about HBO, particularly in its heyday, that's 3 or 4 shows a year that were really hitting people like that, and that was enough to really drive the business. Now, some of that was the old cable model and whatnot, but really it was just because they had 3 or 4 shows every year that a large portion of the country really fell in love with, and that's what we want to do for Black audiences, particularly those that again aren't seeing enough of themselves in mainstream media. If we can bring that there, I think that is just such, an important thing, obviously for our business, but for, the people that we are trying to serve. The other aspect is, though, I hope we are beyond just TV shows and movies eventually. That community aspect that we talk about building, I think is very important. Obviously with the viewers themselves, and allowing them to connect with each other and really connect on that basis of content, that conversation that, we used to have at the water coolers when everyone was watching the same shows the night before. Can we recreate that? Can we do that, not just online, but hopefully in person? Can we have events that bring people together? Can we have movies and then can we bring it to other mediums? So can we do this for the podcast medium? Can we do this for art? Can we do this with books? I'm a little afraid of music. That's a ruthless business, but but maybe some other things. And then can we have a destination, right? Like can we have a some equivalent of Disney or Universal Studios or Busch Gardens or whatever it is. And I don't know if it's an amusement park or anything like that, but can we have something where the people from that love this platform, that love the creators, that love seeing Black stories told, and whether they're Black or not, but can we have a place that people can convene? And maybe that's not a single place. I look at, it's not necessarily my type of content, although I don't begrudge it. But I look at what Bravo does with BravoCon, and they bring all of their reality TV stars out to Vegas. They have all these events and panels and discussions and dinners and things around for their fans and for the people there. Like, can we do that? Can we have a film festival of sorts that does that for the Black creators that we work with and the viewers that love them? And circle that around a 3 or 4 day event. So yeah, I'm excited about getting there and doing those types of things in the next 5 to 10 years. I really think there's a lot here that people are looking for that isn't being done today, that we're seeing being done with maybe not even necessarily mainstream media, but other niches. Like with Bravo and their they're reality people that you see with horror films and things like that. Can we do that for our genre? I think it can be done. I think so, because ours is not just a genre, but it's also an identity, and so we think there's a much stronger hold on the viewer, the consumer, our user, that would be interested in doing things like that.
Yeah, it's a big dream, which is awesome. That's the bigger the dream, the bigger the outcome, and you're dreaming big, which is fantastic. So if you were to give advice, and it's funny, you said in passing, yeah, I don't know about music because music is brutal. It's funny, I have a 20-year-old son who's out in Los Angeles chasing that dream. He's a music producer, chasing that dream, and it is brutal. I mean, it is as cutthroat as you can get. But I guess from a layperson, for me, I see music the same as television, the same as feature film. Like, it's all hyper competitive. You've got tens and hundreds and a million of millions of people going after that dream, that slot, and yet only a select few will make it to the top of that pyramid. So what advice would you give to somebody that's a younger person that is wanting to break into the media business and follow in your footsteps, or in other, be a filmmaker, be a showrunner, be a musician, whatever that may be? Because we're competing for attention, right? Where it's all about competing and winning that war for attention. And I'm just curious, in your experience with YouTube, but now especially with BlackOakTV, what learnings have you taken away that you would say, young Padawan, if you're going to do this, make sure you follow these 2 principles, these 3 principles, whatever that may be. What would you offer them?
The main thing for me, and I do think this is particular to media, particularly in today's day and age with obviously social media and now generative AI, is owning your own media business. Whether that's big or small, whether you want to start your own business or you want to work within a company, I think you need to have that experience in order to do either. One of my earlier jobs that I didn't touch on was doing consulting at a digital media agency for other companies, usually media companies, about how to bring their businesses online. And one of the reasons I got the job was because I was running my own blog, and I didn't even really recognize this, but because I was running the blog and I set it up and I built it and I was doing all these things, I was doing all the small things that made that work. I didn't realize that I was gaining all these skills around, front end design and search engine optimization and advertising revenue and understanding how Google AdSense and Google partnerships works and all. I was doing all those things just as a necessity to do what I ultimately wanted to do, which was just write and commission articles and list and get people to go to my site. And I'm in the interview and they're like, "Oh, you've used Google Analytics? Oh, you use Omniture? Oh, you're familiar with Google Webmaster Tools?" Like, yeah, all that stuff. And I just so organically learned about all these different aspects of the business just by running, this, not that big of a blog. And it was just such an invaluable experience. And I think everybody needs to have that thing, particularly in media, where you're doing that, because I think you need to understand how all of this works. The content creation, the monetization, the distribution, the delivery mechanisms in which your content reaches these other people. I think without that hands-on experience, it's hard to, obviously start your own business. But even when you're working in the context of a bigger company, if you're just in sales, but you don't understand the content creation process, how the things that you're selling actually gets monetized by somebody else, I think it puts you in a worse position than other people that have that position. And it doesn't allow you to grow as fast as you can. So I would advise anybody that wants to get into media in particular, start a YouTube channel, be a content creator. It doesn't have to be large or small, but, try to see how, people derive revenue from that, how they're doing deals, how they're the things that they're doing to grow their followings. These are all very important aspects of being in the media business today. And because of the tools and access that everybody has, it's relatively easy to do that now. So I recommend, anybody that's young and wants to be in media, start doing something on your own. And, you don't know what that can turn into, by the way. You don't know what value that might have later on. But at the very least, you'll have this experience of doing that and seeing all sides of a business, even if it's small. That is just going to help you so much in the future. And it's going to allow you to understand things that where people who haven't had that experience just won't grasp as well as you do.
Yeah, great advice. And I couldn't agree more. All right, last few questions. And usually I ask people for like a book recommendation. I'm a big reader in business biographies and whatnot. But you earlier said that when you were young and growing up, one of your inspirations was, you loved movies and different media. So I'm gonna ask you that instead. I think more fun would be, what's your favorite movie and why? And then I got a couple more after that. So I'll leave it with that for now. What's your favorite movie? And as importantly, why?
Favorite movie. Let me see. Let me make sure I have this right. Okay. Yes. City of God. I haven't said it in a while, so I want to make sure. Yeah. City of God. It's a movie. In college, they had these random movie nights where they'd show movies of, all types. They were usually big budget movies, but for some reason they showed City of God to, a bunch of 20-year-olds. And for whatever reason, it just, took me back. It was this independent looking movie about, the slums of Brazil and Rio, I believe. And it was just so, the cinematography was so awesome. The acting was so great. It was in another language that had subtitles and it didn't bother me because everything happening was just so fast paced. I think it was really just my first time seeing like an artistically driven movie as opposed to just like a studio movie. And that really locked me in. So that is definitely one of my favorite movies of all time. And at the top of the list, at least for now.
Love it. I have seen that and gone past it on either Netflix or Prime. I don't know how many times. So now I'm going to watch that because I've always seen it, not really knowing what it was. So I'm going to watch that. That's great.
It's really good.
Yeah. So, and you're right. Subtitles don't mean anything if it's well acted, and the editing is because you're so drawn into, again, to use that word, the story. You're so drawn into the story that you don't even realize you're reading. Yeah. All right. So last couple of questions. And you're going to live this rich, amazing life, and you're doing amazing things right now. But if we fast forward to the end of your life and, the time has come and we're at your funeral and you're looking down from above and watching a loved one read your eulogy, and if they could only say 3 words, if they could say 3 words about Uzo and describe your life, what 3 words would you hope they would say?
Ronald, this is so morbid. You asking me to give my own eulogy?
It's not meant to be morbid, though. It's honestly, it's meant to be like those 3 words are what we should strive for every day to achieve, so that we.
That's fair. It's fair. Yeah. It's fair. But with this morbid angle, but that's fine. I would say 3 words. 3 words. Driven, fair, and caring, which isn't something I probably would have said before I had kids. But I mean, I gotta have that one in there because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, the kids will change the game. Maybe you're the first one that's called me out on that, so I may, because I asked that to everybody, I may just change it to, we're at the end of your life, you're still alive, but we're just doing a celebration of life before anything happens. So that's fair, though. That's because it's not meant to be.
I don't have a problem with it. But I just calling it for what it is.
That's fair. All right, and then this one's fun. Last question before we find out how people can connect with you. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and make the world different in one material way, you could materially change the world in one way with this one stroke of a wand. When we wake up tomorrow and you've waved that magic wand, how is the world different according to Uzo?
I would want everybody to have access to the same amount of education. Everybody, if I had to pick one thing, it's everybody having access to the same levels of education as anyone else in the world can get. And I don't know if that's necessarily a panacea, but I think it is a pretty good one that if we're going to apply the same thing to everybody, I think that's important, because I think if everybody, enters this world and, comes of age and has the same, ability to read and synthesize and understand and talk and write and all these things, I really do think that levels the playing field a great deal, because I think the diversity of thoughts that people have, the diversity of resources people in different regions can bring to the forefront, I think all of that gets used and spread out, and that we start to see a more fair and equitable world for everyone, if they have the education to go about and take advantage of the things around them.
Yeah. I'll just quickly share, in my early 20s, I had relocated to a city, and so I got involved, and I joined a program to help adults that couldn't read, adults that just hadn't learned to read to read. And it was so mind-bending for me, because you and I take it for granted. We can read, which means you can learn anything you want to learn. You don't understand something, you can read how to do it and learn how to do it. And when, as I helped this gentleman learn more, just to read the newspaper and read different things, he was an Hispanic American, and Spanish was his first language, but he still couldn't read. And so I was teaching him how to read English, which was even more challenging. And I just realized, wow, when a human being has the ability to read, the world opens up. But if you can't read, then what you learn is so dictated by those who control the media, or those in power, or whatever it is. And it was, 30 years ago, I had that lesson, and it stuck with me, because it kind of shook me a little bit that, wow, this is something we just take for granted when you grow up with an education. And when you don't have an education, it's a whole different world. It is just a whole different world. So I appreciate that answer. Well, most importantly, how can people follow you, connect with you, and follow your journey?
Yeah. Well, obviously, people can check out BlackOakTV at BlackOak.tv. We're also across just about every major social media platform out there. BlackOakTV, all one word, is where you can find us across the board. And then you can obviously follow me at Uzo Ometu on X or Twitter, or whatever one wants to call it.
It's called this week.
Or, I think I talk a lot about, the business side of media on LinkedIn in particular. So you can also follow me there as well.
Cool. And we'll put those in the show notes too, so that people can just click on it to get to you. Well, thank you. You're a very, I don't know how to say, you're just, you put a lot of thought into what you're going to say, and I really appreciate it. There's a better way to phrase that, which is kind of ironic. That's what I'm trying to say, how well spoken you are. And
slow talkers, slow thinkers, or a couple of words that work.
Deliberate. That's the word. Deliberate's the word I was trying to think of. And I just appreciate you. And I appreciate what you're doing, man. You got a dream. It's big, and you're going for it. And I applaud that 7 days a week. I just think that's awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you, Roger, for the kind words, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.